You know, there was a time when you didn't choose the movie chose you. You'd be flipping through channels late at night, TNT, TBS, USA Network, and suddenly a movie was on. Maybe it was halfway through. Maybe you'd already seen it 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 100. Who knows? But somehow, some way, you watched it anyway, because certain movies in the 80s and 90s didn't just become popular, they became cable legends. Movies that seemed to play every weekend, every late night, movies that entire generations discovered by accident, by osmosis, really. And the strange thing is, many of those films didn't become legendary in theater. Some did for many people, but it was cable TV that put them into our collective consciousness, because television is what made them legendary. So tonight, we're looking at how cable TV and even broadcast TV turned certain movies into permanent pop culture comfort food that we all know and love even today. So pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this. All right, so the cable TV era. If you grew up in the 80s or 90s, cable TV wasn't just background noise. It was a movie discovery machine. It was a crucial part of our pop culture. So before streaming, before YouTube, before algorithms recommended movies to you, cable TV was the place where people discovered films. You had channels like TNT, TBS, the USA Network, WGN, AMC, HBO, or Cinemax if you were wealthy or really lucky. And these networks ran movies constantly. And unlike streaming, you didn't get to pick the movie. You stumbled onto it, you'd flip channels, and suddenly you'd land on something like Predator halfway through, or The Fugitive. Maybe you had seen the beginning before, maybe you hadn't, maybe seen it 100 times, but you watched it anyway because the movie was already in motion. And that created a completely different relationship between audiences and films. This different relationship was through the repetition effect. Cable television did something incredibly powerful. Essentially, it just repeated movies over and over and over again. And a movie like Tombstone, later on, it might have ran a dozen times a year on just one channel, like on TBS, but it also might have ran a dozen times on TNT and another dozen on AMC. So this movie is on 30 to 40, 50 times per year. But before that, when there were even less movies and less competition, something like Top Gun or The Beastmaster or Lethal Weapon and Die Hard, these things might run multiple times a week on TBS or TNT. And that repetition created something powerful. I mean, TBS was known for a while as the Beastmaster station. HBO was known as, hey, Beastmaster's on, for a reason. That repetition became powerful because the more times that you encountered a movie and other people encountered the movie, the more familiar you all became with it. Eventually, those films turned into something more than just entertainment. They became comfort viewing, a part of our lives, part of the tapestry of our childhood and growing up. Movies that you could watch endlessly, movies you could jump into at any moment, movies that kind of felt like old friends that you could put on and count on and enjoy no matter when you started watching them. And part of that was like what they would call the halfway movie phenomenon. This is something that younger viewers might not fully understand or ever understand. Cable television created a completely unique viewing experience. Watching movies halfway through. You'd turn on a TV and suddenly land right in the middle of something. The train crash scene in The Fugitive, or the volleyball scene in Top Gun, or the shootout at the OK Corral in Tombstone, or the jungle ambush scene in Predator. And you didn't rewind it. You didn't restart it because you couldn't do those things. You just watched it from wherever it happened to be, which meant that certain types of movies back then had to work in fragments. They needed memorable scenes, strong characters that everyone knew and identified, and moments that could pull viewers in instantly from a bunch of different points in the film. And the movies then mastered that style, and they became classics largely because of it. And then you had the TBS and Superstation effect, because here's an important part of the story that sometimes people forget. Not everyone had cable in the 80s, at least not for all of the 80s. In the early days, cable television wasn't cheap and you couldn't get it everywhere. A lot of families didn't have cable, but there was another way that millions of Americans experienced the same movie culture. It was a channel called TBS, the Superstation. Broadcast out of right here around my home in Atlanta, Georgia, TBS reached over the air and into the homes of everyone across the United States. The same with WGN to a big extent. Even households without full cable packages could often get the signal of TBS, which meant millions of people across the country watching the same movies again and again. For many viewers, TBS became a place where they discovered movies like Beastmaster, the Beastmaster station, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Even Star Wars was on all the time. Empire Strikes Back played constantly. And plenty of horror movies showed all the time. The Thing, even Nightmare on Elm Street, very edited and cut down. Friday the 13th movies, very edited and cut down, would replay constantly. And if you grew up during that era, you probably remember another part of that routine, because the movies were often part of the same nightly schedule. They played after Atlanta Braves games, sometimes before, depending on the week, if it was a day of the week, like if it was Saturday. But the Braves games would often be from like 7:35 or 7:05 to 10:35 or 11, and then they would show a double feature late at night. Maybe The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and The Thing were going to come on late at night after baseball. And that happened across the country. So TBS didn't just broadcast movies, it created a shared national movie experience for everyone who could reach out and grab it over the airwaves with an antenna. And that led into the TNT era. TNT on cable, late 80s, early 90s. That channel became very famous, and it leaned heavily into the blockbuster films and built an entire identity around big, rewatchable movies with iconic stars. And if you grew up during that era, you probably remember this pattern. Turn on TNT on a random weekend, and the chances were pretty good you'd find something like The Shawshank Redemption or Die Hard or Tombstone or something like that. And you'd end up watching them again and again and again. And eventually those movies, they stop feeling, same thing with Indiana Jones on there. They stop feeling like programming, and they start feeling like traditions, things that you can count on that connected all of us. This era also gave rise to the dad movie factor. Cable and TBS stations showed these movies again and again, and dads never got tired of watching them. Action films, westerns. There was always a Clint Eastwood movie on somewhere. If it wasn't a big, especially on TBS, you were going to get like Escape from Alcatraz, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. All that kind of, you were going to get that all the time. Sports films, Rocky, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Hoosiers, Jaws played constantly. All of these movies, and you walk into the living room and they'd already be on. Your dad would be watching, grandfather, someone would be watching them. And the funny thing is, it didn't matter how far into the movie it was. Somebody would say, sit down, this is the good part. And cable television and even over-the-air TV stations back then helped create those moments, and they turned those movies into family rituals and memories that still connect us to that time and those people and those films today. And then there was the VHS connection to all this, because at the same time cable TV was exploding, another revolution was happening. Video rental stores. Movies were suddenly portable, ownable, rentable. If you loved a movie and you discovered it on cable, you could rent it, the uncut, the unedited version. Cable introduced the movie to you, and eventually you could buy it in its real theatrical form. So you could see it, because back then all the movies were edited for content, runtime, to fit your TV screen, format change, all that stuff. And when you rented them, you had been revisiting them again and again on TV. And then you got the uncut version, and it made it feel even more familiar and more special at the same time. And the movies thrived in that ecosystem, and they became the ultimate rewatch films, and they became ingrained into our pop culture zeitgeist, and they are still there today. The truth is, a lot of these movies were built for cable and for VHS rentals. They were almost perfectly aligned. They had strong, big openings that hooked you in, memorable characters, iconic movie stars, action sequences ever so often in the movie, spread out exactly at the right timing. Movies like Die Hard, if you landed halfway through, you could immediately be pulled into the action and not be lost. The same thing with Predator, Lethal Weapon, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, any of those movies like that. These films had a rhythm that worked perfectly with channel surfing, with constant rewatches, which is one of the reasons they became endless cable and VHS rental staples. So what changed? Why is streaming so different than that? It's because today we choose exactly what we want to watch. Everything is catered to the individual. There isn't a shared experience there, and there isn't a forced choice on you. We start from the beginning, we pause, we rewind, but something is lost, and it's the accidental discovery and the repetitive viewing. The moment of landing on a movie already in progress and then experiencing it from that point on. Cable TV created a shared movie experience, millions of people watching the film at the same time. Streaming is very personal, where cable was communal. It was still part of a collective experience. Before my dad passed away, he was a big physical media collector. He loved movies. He turned me on to a lot of B movies and these cable movies and all that kind of stuff. But even though he owned the movies, particularly like around Christmas or Halloween, he would often still choose to watch the movies on cable TV instead of watching them from his physical media collection, and definitely not on streaming. And if you ask him why, he would say, because if I put in the disc or if I watch on streaming, I'm watching by myself. But if I watch Jingle All the Way or Home Alone or Halloween, when those come on during Halloween or Christmas season on a night, I am watching with everyone else. And that struck me so hard. And there's so much truth to that. It felt different to him because he knew if he watched Home Alone on TNT on December 15th on a Saturday, there were thousands, if not millions of other people watching that movie with him. He was a part of something bigger. He was connected to more than just himself. And there is so much power and just genuine love in that it struck me, and I have never forgot it. And I think that's something that those films in the cable era captured, in the VHS era even captured, because we had to go out and share the experience of finding them, that streaming just never will. And unless you've experienced that, you may never understand it. Today, many movies people remember most fondly come from the 80s, 90s, and the late 70s. And it wasn't because they were huge budget spectacles and all of them were massive blockbuster success stories. They were movies that lived on television, on VHS, movies that felt like old friends, part of your family, part of the collective pop culture. You could watch them at any time, and they were on at different points. It didn't matter. They were movies that defined entire weekends, sleepovers, shared experiences. And for a lot of us, those movies didn't become legendary in theaters. They became legendary because of cable TV and superstations like TBS and networks like TNT and USA Up All Night that replayed them constantly until they became a part of our lives. So now I'm curious, what movies always seemed to be on TV when you were growing up? Was it stuff like Die Hard, Roadhouse, Beastmaster, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Revenge of the Nerds, The Thing, Hoosiers, Rocky, Jaws? What was it? Was it something else completely entirely? The Breakfast Club? Who knows? Let me know in the comments, because chances are someone else remembers flipping through channels and landing on that exact same movie. Weird Science, anybody? And I want to know, so let me know down there in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And if you enjoyed this and you want to help support what we're doing here a little more, you can join my Patreon. The link is always in the description. You'll get your name and lights on every single video, behind the scenes looks at my filmmaking, special members only videos, and so much more. And everything goes back to the channel and supports what we're doing here, and I really do appreciate it. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. I know.